The Zelvani flagship Dreadfong loomed in orbit over the newly discovered world, its massive, claw-like design casting an ominous shadow over the lush blue planet below. Commander Ricard of the Zelvani Dominion sneered as he examined the intercepted transmissions from the surface. The creatures who inhabited this world, humans, as they called themselves, were laughably small. A mere 5 to 6 feet in height, frail-looking, and without natural weapons. No talons, no fangs, no armored hides. They were prey. This will be effortless, Ricard growled, baring his tusks. Dispatch a strike team. Capture a few of them for study. The attack came at dawn. Zelvani warriors, each towering over 9 feet tall, clad in impenetrable battle armor, descended upon a human outpost. Their orders were clear: overwhelm them, take prisoners, and return to the fleet. They expected panic. They expected surrender. What they got was hell. The humans fought back. Not with brute force, but with something far more terrifying: strategy, The moment the Zelvani landed, their communications were jammed. Their targeting system scrambled. Explosions erupted in key locations, splitting their forces. Human soldiers, significantly smaller, moved in synchronized teams, striking where the Zelvani were weakest: joints, exposed sensory nodes, blind spots. Every step forward became a death trap. One by one, the mighty Zelvani fell. By the time the last warrior managed to send a distress signal, it was already too late. His squad was gone. A single human stood over him, rifle aimed, eyes cold. "You thought we were weak," the human whispered. "Big mistake." The Zelvani fleet received a single transmission from the surface. A chilling warning, broadcast across all channels. "To the Zelvani Empire, you have made first contact with humanity. You will not get a second chance. Leave, or we will bury you." On board the Dreadfong, Commander Ricard stared at the screen in stunned silence. This wasn't the response of a prey species. This was something else. Something far more dangerous. And for the first time in his life, he felt fear. The Zelvani Empire, accustomed to centuries of unquestioned dominance, could not fathom what had just transpired. Their warriors, trained to slaughter whole populations without mercy, had been outwitted and outmaneuvered by a species they had barely regarded as more than pests. Yet here they were, facing an enemy unlike any other. In the months following the brutal skirmish on the human outpost, the Zelvani launched a full-scale invasion, certain that a decisive victory would put the humans back in their place. The plan was simple: overwhelm the humans with their vast fleets and superior firepower, crush their morale, and make them surrender before they could rise again. The Zelvani ships descended in vast numbers, their sleek vessels blotting out the sun as they arrived in human space. They had come prepared, armed with advanced weaponry, unmatched in power. But they had underestimated the humans in every possible way. The first sign of trouble came when the Zelvani landed on another human colony, one known for its strategic importance. They were ready for a short, brutal engagement. Instead, they found a battlefield unlike any they had ever encountered. The humans had turned the terrain into a death trap. Mines were rigged, the city's infrastructure was used to create intricate ambushes, and every street, every alley was a maze that led to nothing but chaos for the invaders. They were met not with overwhelming numbers but with precision, traps, and guerrilla warfare that had been perfected over centuries of human history. The Zelvani, powerful as they were, found themselves unable to keep up. Every time they thought they had taken control of a sector, a new surprise awaited them: human soldiers who fought without hesitation, who blended into their environment with unnerving ease. The humans moved like ghosts, invisible, and their enemies' fear began to set in. What frightened the Zelvani the most was how the humans adapted. They didn't follow traditional military tactics; instead, they relied on unpredictability and cunning. Their leaders, though not genetically superior, had a singular ability: the ability to think. They adapted faster than the Zelvani could react, using captured technology, exploiting weaknesses in enemy armor, and employing mind games that caused dissension within the ranks of their invaders. The Zelvani, masters of traditional warfare, found themselves cornered by a species whose greatest weapon wasn't brute strength, but their intellect. In one pivotal moment, a human operative named Captain Sarah Holt led a counteroffensive that would go down in history as one of the most audacious military feats ever. She had learned the Zelvani's battle rhythms from intercepted communications, their scheduling, and habits. She staged a seemingly futile attack on a supply convoy, drawing the Zelvani into a carefully planned trap. They followed the bait and walked straight into an ambush, where her forces annihilated their elite strike team. Back at the Zelvani command center, their leaders scrambled to understand what had just occurred. They sent their best commanders to the front lines, but it became clear that humanity wasn't just surviving, they were forcing the invaders to adapt to them. On the Zelvani flagship Dreadfang, Commander Ricard paced furiously. The enemy was unpredictable, and this time, their strength was not in numbers. They couldn't rely on their old tactics, and this war was beginning to spiral out of control. In private meetings, he confessed to his superiors that their forces might not be as invincible as they had believed. He had seen the humans fight, not with the strength of giants, but with the tenacity of those who had nothing to lose. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the humans had made a name for themselves. The resistance movements, once small and scattered, had grown into well-coordinated cells. Every victory over the Zelvani was broadcast across the stars, stoking fear in the hearts of those who had once viewed humanity as weak. The humans were no longer considered prey. They were predators now, calculating, deadly, and capable of turning the tide of the war with a single, well-timed strike. The Zelvani, still too proud to retreat, began to feel a growing dread at the thought of facing these small, relentless enemies. As their fleets pressed deeper into human space, the true nature of their mistake became clear. They had underestimated a species capable of outsmarting even the mightiest of empires. The galaxy, once filled with the confident bluster of the Zelvani, now buzzed with whispers of an empire on the brink of collapse, and humanity was the cause. Fear began to take root in the hearts of the Zelvani. And in the void of space, it was the humans who now held the power. The Zelvani had underestimated humanity in ways they couldn't have imagined. Now, they faced a nightmare they hadn't even thought to prepare for. The small, fragile species they had written off as insignificant had just unveiled a terrifying new weapon, **intelligence**. It wasn't just that the humans had been outmaneuvering the Zelvani on the battlefield, they were rewriting the rules of war itself. They had learned from every encounter, improving their tactics, adapting to every threat. But it was the revelation of humanity's greatest asset, its ingenuity, that truly turned the tide. The Zelvani, with all their technological superiority, had assumed that brute force and advanced weaponry would win the day. They were wrong. Humanity's weapons were not just their guns or ships, it was their mind. And that mind could do things the Zelvani hadn't even thought possible. Human soldiers, led by the brilliant strategist Sarah Holt, had discovered a way to reverse-engineer Zelvani technology. What started as scavenging for spare parts had evolved into a full-blown technological arms race. The humans were using alien systems, understanding them in ways their creators could not, and turning those very tools against their makers. They adapted alien technology not only for battle but for war in ways that were unimaginable to the Zelvani. It was as though humanity had developed an almost symbiotic relationship with the technology they commandeered. What began as salvaged Zelvani ships were now piloted by humans with the skill of veterans who had fought for centuries. The Zelvani began to see their once dominant warships hijacked and turned against them in shocking assaults. Weapons that were supposed to be the epitome of superiority were now being used in ways they had never been designed for. The humans' knowledge of human psychology, their ability to think outside the confines of traditional war tactics, turned their tactics into a nightmare for the Zelvani. They began using simple concepts, like psychological warfare, in ways that fractured the Zelvani's collective resolve. They sabotaged the Zelvani's communications with false messages, using their enemies' own fears against them. No one was safe, and trust began to break down within the Zelvani ranks. Even the most loyal warriors were questioning the leadership that had led them into such a catastrophic war. The fear wasn't just physical. It was mental. something that gnawed at the very core of the Zelvani Empire. The first psychological campaign to be launched by the humans was aimed at the Zelvani leadership itself. They hacked into the highest echelons of the Empire's command structure, broadcasting haunting images of the Zelvani's once proud battle fleet crumbling under the weight of humanity's counteroffensives. A simple message followed: you were warned. Within weeks, the Zelvani generals, once proud and unshakable, began reporting signs of panic. Troops were defecting, commanders were disappearing, and entire fleets were reluctant to engage. The humans had not only defeated the Zelvani in battle, they had shattered their spirit. And then came the darkest weapon. On a desolate moon on the edge of Zelvani space, humanity unveiled a weapon so devastating that it sent ripples through the Empire. Captain Holt had overseen the project from its inception, a weapon born not from the human desire for destruction but from their understanding of the unseen. They had reverse-engineered a Zelvani experimental weapon, a device designed to cripple entire fleets by disrupting neural pathways and causing complete paralysis. The Zelvani had used it against lesser species, but the humans had figured out how to weaponize it in a way no one had predicted. They unleashed it on a key Zelvani base. An entire fleet of Zelvani warships was rendered incapacitated in a matter of seconds. The ships froze mid-space, their crews locked in an inescapable paralysis. It wasn't just a physical defeat, it was an existential blow. The Zelvani Empire's most prized warships, completely disabled and under the control of their human captors. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity not only defeated their enemies but turned their greatest weapons back upon them. For the first time in history, a species that had never known galactic war stood as a force more terrifying than anything the Zelvani could have imagined. They had outsmarted the mightiest empire in the galaxy, not just with force, but with a relentless drive to outthink them at every turn. It was no longer a question of if humanity could win, it was how quickly they could rewrite the rules of galactic conflict. The Zelvani Empire had underestimated them, and in doing so, had awakened a sleeping giant, a giant whose intellect and resourcefulness were more devastating than the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Humanity had proven that no matter how mighty an empire, it could be undone by the smallest species in the galaxy, the species that fought not with the size of their weapons, but with the power of their minds. The Zelvani Empire was unraveling, and the very fabric of their once unstoppable war machine began to fray. It wasn't just the constant defeats, nor was it the loss of critical battles. It was the psychological toll. The tiny humans, whom they had considered little more than an insignificant species, were now a force that could not be ignored, no matter how much the Zelvani tried to push them back. The human resistance continued to grow, spreading like wildfire across the galaxy. New alliances were formed, not out of desperation, but out of a recognition of humanity's growing power. The Zelvani had expected their war to be brief, a simple act of conquest to snuff out a minor annoyance. But instead, they found themselves in a protracted struggle, one that was draining their resources, their morale, and their will to fight. The turning point came when a massive human fleet, led by the resourceful Captain Sarah Holt, launched a daring assault against the Zelvani Central Command hub. It was a fortress beyond anything the humans had encountered, a massive structure buried deep in the heart of a dead star system. The Zelvani had believed it to be impregnable, a symbol of their superiority and invulnerability. But the humans didn't care about the fortress's size or strength. They cared about one thing, the weakness of the Zelvani's arrogance. The Zelvani had never expected anyone to think on their level, much less outsmart them. This time, the humans didn't just attack the fortress head-on, they launched a multi-pronged deception operation. While a small fleet distracted the Zelvani's defenses, Sarah Holt led an elite team of operatives into the heart of the fortress. Their mission was simple but audacious: infiltrate and sabotage the core systems. No one believed they could succeed. The Zelvani watched from their war rooms, smug in their confidence. That was their first mistake. The human team not only breached the fortress but set off a chain of events that shattered the Zelvani's command structure. Key systems were sabotaged, data was stolen, and their most powerful weapons were turned against them. The Zelvani watched in horror as their flagship's reactor core detonated from the inside out, setting off a chain reaction that spread across their entire fleet. The shockwaves of that attack were felt not just across the battlefield, but across the Zelvani Empire itself. The humans, in their relentless pursuit of victory, had struck a crippling blow to the heart of the Zelvani military. No longer were they invincible. No longer could they claim the galaxy was theirs to conquer. In the aftermath of the assault, fear took root in the Zelvani leadership. High-ranking officers began to question their orders, wondering if humanity's rise was truly unstoppable. The generals who had once feared no one were now consumed by the growing realization that they had been playing a losing game all along. This fear spread quickly through the ranks. Soldiers who had once been proud to serve the Empire began to question their commitment. Their once unshakable belief in their superiority was eroded by the humiliating defeats they had suffered at the hands of such a small species. Desertions rose, and reports of Zelvani troops refusing to fight became more frequent. Meanwhile, humanity's victory was not just military, it was cultural. The galaxy, once a collection of fragmented species under the thumb of the Zelvani, now looked to humanity with a new sense of awe and respect. Resistance movements that had once been insignificant uprisings now rallied under the human banner. The smallest species in the galaxy had not only survived, they had conquered in ways that defied conventional warfare. The Zelvani, their once feared empire crumbling, attempted to quell the growing dissent within their ranks. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Humanity's rise was no longer a hopeful fantasy for the oppressed, it was a tangible, undeniable reality. And the Zelvani were caught in the middle, their attempts to salvage their empire only hastening its collapse. In their final attempts to turn the tide, the Zelvani launched an all-out assault against a human stronghold in the Zenthian system, hoping to end the human threat once and for all. The battle was fierce, but the Zelvani couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were everywhere. They struck from the shadows, used their own technology against them, and attacked with a relentless ferocity that shook the Zelvani to their very core. And in that final battle, something changed. The Zelvani fleet, once a symbol of unmatched power, was shattered. The human defenders, though outnumbered and outgunned, stood firm. They did not break. They did not yield. And when the smoke cleared, it was humanity's flag flying high. In a matter of months, the once great Zelvani Empire was in ruins. The fear that had once been a tool of their dominance was now their prison. The empire that had thought themselves rulers of the stars was reduced to a broken, isolated faction, hunted by their enemies, abandoned by their allies, and overwhelmed by the weight of their own arrogance. Fear had taken root, but it wasn't the fear of the Zelvani Empire that now dominated the galaxy. It was the fear of humanity, a species that, despite their size, had become the most terrifying force in the galaxy. The once proud Zelvani Empire, shattered and crumbling, had reached its breaking point. It was no longer a matter of conquest or domination, it was a desperate struggle for survival. The galaxy had witnessed the fall of their greatest military might, and every day that passed, the Zelvani found themselves pushed closer to extinction. But in their desperation, they were about to make one final, catastrophic decision. Aboard the Zelvani flagship Dreadfang, Commander Ricard stood before a shattered council of generals and advisors. His expression was grim, his mind weighed down by the realization that they were on the verge of complete annihilation. The human resistance had taken everything, their fleets, their colonies, their strongholds. All that was left was their pride, and that was hanging by a thread. "We have no choice," Commander Ricard said, his voice cold and determined. "We will initiate the Last Dawn Protocol." The room fell silent. The Last Dawn Protocol was a plan devised long ago as a final solution, an ultimate weapon meant to wipe out entire star systems, to turn the tide of any war in the Zelvani's favor. But it was more than just a weapon, it was a sacrifice. It would mean the end of their empire. Their greatest weapon was capable of erasing all life in a region of space, a weapon that, once deployed, would destroy everything and everyone in its path. For Ricard, it was a choice between complete extinction and using this doomsday device to erase humanity's presence in the galaxy. The galaxy had been his people's domain for so long that the thought of being wiped out by such a small, insignificant species felt unbearable. They would not go down without one final strike. We will destroy them, he vowed, even if it costs us everything. But even as he gave the order, doubt gnawed at him. He knew that the weapon could not be undone. It would end the Zelvani Empire for good. There would be no going back. Back in the human fleet, Captain Sarah Holt stood on the bridge of the flagship Valor, staring at the stars that stretched out before her. The humans had seen victory after victory, but they knew the Zelvani were not defeated yet. They had fought tooth and nail for their survival, and it was only a matter of time before the remnants of their empire would make their final move. The Last Dawn Protocol was not a secret. Humanity's intelligence networks had uncovered its existence months ago, and they knew the Zelvani would resort to it. The humans were prepared, but they had never imagined it would come to this. This wasn't just about military supremacy anymore, it was about survival on a galactic scale. "We'll stop them," Sarah said, her voice resolute. "We'll find a way to disable the weapon before they can use it." Her officers nodded in agreement. The Valor was one of the fastest ships in the fleet, and they would have to rely on speed, cunning, and the same ingenuity that had gotten humanity this far. The plan was simple, but its execution would be anything but. They had to reach the Dreadfang before the Zelvani could deploy the weapon, before the galaxy could be reduced to nothing. The battle for the Dreadfang was as fierce as humanity had ever known. The Zelvani knew that their ultimate weapon was their last chance. The humans knew that stopping it would mean ending the war once and for all. Both sides fought with everything they had, knowing that this was the defining moment of the conflict. The human fleet closed in on the flagship, and the Zelvani responded with everything they had left. But the Zelvani, once the masters of strategy, were now cornered. They couldn't win. They could only destroy. Inside the Dreadfang, Rakar watched from the command deck as the human ships approached. The weapon was ready to fire, primed to unleash its fury across the galaxy. And yet, even as he prepared to give the final order, a strange feeling crept into his mind, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. He was afraid. Afraid of failing his empire. Afraid of the humans. His people had always feared nothing, until now. In a final, desperate gambit, Captain Sarah Holt led a team aboard the Dreadfang, slipping through the shadows of the battle to disable the weapon before it could be used. They infiltrated the heart of the ship, navigating corridors filled with traps and Zelvani soldiers who had sworn to die defending their weapon. Time was running out, and every second brought them closer to the destruction of everything they had fought for. But humanity's resolve was unshakable. The humans had faced impossible odds before, and they would do so again. They had one chance. Captain Holt and her team reached the heart of the ship, where the Last Dawn Protocol was ready to launch. They fought their way through, reaching the core just in time. But there was a complication. Rakar was there, waiting for them. "You don't understand," Rakar growled, his voice shaking with both fury and fear. "This is the only way to end this war. You'll never defeat us. Never." "We already have," Sarah replied, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We outthink you, we outfight you, and we will never stop." With a swift motion, she activated the override, deactivating the weapon just seconds before it would have been deployed. The Last Dawn Protocol was disarmed. The Zelvani Empire had no more cards to play. Their final weapon was gone, and with it, any hope of victory. Rakar, realizing the futility of continuing the war, finally surrendered. The galaxy was forever changed. The smallest species, whom the Zelvani had dismissed as insignificant, had brought down the mightiest empire the stars had ever seen. Humanity had become the most feared species in the galaxy, not because of their size, but because of their unyielding determination, intellect, and will to survive. The Zelvani, their pride shattered, were forced into exile. They were no longer a force to be reckoned with. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never forget the day the smallest species rose to become the most powerful. In the wake of the Zelvani Empire's defeat, a silence fell over the galaxy. The once dominant force that had controlled vast swaths of space had been reduced to nothing, their empire crumbling into dust. The stars, once bathed in the oppressive shadow of the Zelvani, now glimmered with the dawn of a new era, a human era. Humanity, despite its humble beginnings as a species on a small, forgotten planet, had proven to be the galaxy's most formidable force. With the fall of the Zelvani, the other species who had been oppressed under their rule began to see humanity not as an underdog, but as the rising power in the galaxy. The first step toward creating their galactic dominion was the forging of alliances. Though many species had once considered humans insignificant, they now recognized them as the architects of a new galactic order. The human fleet, ever victorious, began to build relationships with the alien factions who had long struggled under the Zelvani yoke. There were no promises of totalitarian rule, no demands for control. Humanity offered something different: freedom. Under the banner of the United Species Coalition, a new alliance was born. It wasn't just a political alliance, it was a commitment to something greater than any individual species, a commitment to unity, shared prosperity, and a vision of a galaxy where strength was not determined by the size of one's fleet or the breadth of one's empire, but by the power of cooperation. Captain Sarah Holt, now one of the most respected leaders in the galaxy, was instrumental in forging this alliance. She was no longer just a military commander. She had become a symbol of humanity's strength, physical, intellectual, and moral. Under her leadership, humanity moved from a species fighting for survival to a force that could shape the future of the stars. The coalition began to grow, drawing in species from every corner of the galaxy. The Shakarians, once an oppressed people, offered their advanced knowledge of quantum mechanics to help stabilize the galactic economy. The Vantasi, renowned for their shipbuilding prowess, joined in, providing the infrastructure for humanity's burgeoning fleet. Even the deadly Karen, a species known for their brutal martial culture, pledged their allegiance, impressed by humanity's cunning and determination. As the new galactic power, humanity didn't force their way into leadership. Instead, they acted as a guiding hand, encouraging self-rule and diplomacy while ensuring that the lessons of the past were never forgotten. Every species that joined the coalition did so out of respect, not fear. They saw that humanity, though small in stature, possessed something far more dangerous than sheer might, the ability to unite. Yet, as humanity expanded its influence, not all species welcomed the rise of this new power. Those who had once been in the pockets of the Zelvani, those who had benefited from the oppression of others, were now faced with the reality that they would no longer be able to hold sway over the galaxy. One such faction was the Felari Dominion, a ruthless, militaristic species that had long been allies of the Zelvani. They had not forgotten the humiliating defeat their empire had suffered at the hands of humanity, and they had no intention of allowing the humans to expand unchecked. They began to stir unrest within the galaxy, attempting to destabilize the growing coalition by spreading fear and propaganda. But humanity was ready. In the weeks following their victory, Captain Holt and her council had anticipated such resistance. Using the intelligence they had gained during the war with the Zelvani, humanity was able to expose the Felari Dominion's manipulations and bring their actions to light. The galaxy was no longer blind to the true intentions of the Felari, and their power began to wane. A swift, decisive military campaign was launched to neutralize the Dominion's influence, led by the legendary Admiral Elias Vance, one of humanity's most brilliant tacticians. The battle was swift and brutal. The Felari, though a powerful force, could not compete with the combined might of the United Species Coalition. They were forced to retreat into the fringes of space, their attempts to disrupt the galaxy's progress crushed. The victory over the Felari was symbolic. It wasn't just the defeat of a military threat, it was a demonstration of the strength of the coalition. It showed the galaxy that humanity, though young and small, was a force for unity. No longer would the galaxy be divided by empires that cared only for conquest and subjugation. It would be a galaxy where even the smallest species could stand tall and claim their place among the stars. But as humanity's influence spread, it became clear that not all challenges could be overcome by might alone. The vastness of the galaxy meant that new threats, both seen and unseen, were always lurking, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Humanity's rise was not the end of conflict, it was only the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. And yet, as the stars glowed brighter than ever before, one truth remained: humanity had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the smallest species in the galaxy could rise to become the most feared, and the most revered. The future of the galaxy was now in the hands of the United Species Coalition, with humanity at the helm. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but there was no longer any doubt that humanity would meet them with the same ingenuity, courage, and determination that had brought them from the depths of obscurity to the height of galactic power. The galaxy was no longer a place of empires and domination. It was a place of opportunity, and it was humanity that would lead the way. The galaxy had been forever changed. The fall of the Zelvani Empire was only the beginning. Humanity's rise had not been a flash in the pan, it was the spark of a new era, an era of transformation. Under the leadership of the United Species Coalition, the old order of domination and oppression had begun to crumble. The vast expanse of space, once a playground for the powerful, was now a frontier for cooperation and peace. But even as humanity basked in the glow of their hard-won victory, not everyone was content. The Felari Dominion, still licking their wounds from their defeat, had begun to regroup. Other factions, many of whom had previously hidden in the shadows, began to test the waters, pushing back against the new balance of power. But humanity was prepared. Captain Sarah Holt, now the de facto leader of the United Species Coalition, stood on the bridge of the Valor, watching the stars streak by. The threat of renewed conflict was ever present, but she had seen the strength of humanity's resolve, and she knew their greatest asset wasn't their weapons or fleets. It was their unity. The first few years of rebuilding had been challenging. There was work to be done, and there were deep divisions to heal. Many species that had been part of the Zelvani's former empire struggled to adapt to this new world. But humanity understood the importance of healing the galaxy, not just rebuilding it from the ground up, but nurturing it, one alliance at a time. Sarah had met with leaders from all corners of the galaxy, from the wise, ancient Nari, their psychic abilities far beyond human comprehension, to the brutal, battle-hardened Karen, whose martial prowess had earned them respect. The humans were tireless in their efforts to ensure that every voice, every species, had a say in the galaxy's future. It wasn't about force, it was about understanding and shared purpose. But as humanity's influence continued to grow, the galaxy began to understand one undeniable truth: no one could underestimate humanity again. Their courage, their ingenuity, and their unshakable will to survive were the very foundation of the new order. It was during a routine diplomatic mission that the United Species Coalition encountered a new threat. The Zarathi, a technologically advanced race who had remained neutral during the war with the Zelvani, had been watching humanity's rise from afar. Their rulers, the Zarathian Council, saw humanity's growing power as a threat to their carefully balanced isolationist policies. The Zarathi believed that humanity's unchecked growth could disrupt the fragile peace they had maintained for millennia. So they issued an ultimatum: humanity must cease its expansion or face the full force of Zarathian might. The coalition's council was torn. The Zarathi were not a people to take lightly, they controlled vast networks of trade, military, and scientific knowledge. A confrontation could spark a war that would tear apart everything humanity had worked for. It was in this moment of crisis that Sarah Holt stood before the council, a calm center in the midst of the storm. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, but Sarah had one tool at her disposal that no other species had: human ingenuity. "We don't need to fight," Sarah said, her voice resolute. The Zarathi believe their strength lies in isolation and control, but what they fear most is change. They fear what happens when the galaxy begins to adapt, to evolve beyond the old ways. They fear that their monopoly on power will dissolve, and in that fear, they will overplay their hand. The council looked to Sarah, uncertain. "What do you propose, Captain?" "We offer them something they can't refuse," Sarah said, her eyes locking onto each member of the council. "We offer them unity. Not just with us, but with every species in the galaxy. We offer them a future where they're not isolated in fear, but part of something bigger, a galaxy-wide cooperation, not a divided collection of empires. They fear humanity, but we can show them that they have more to gain by joining us than by trying to stand apart." And so, the humans did the unthinkable. Rather than approaching the Zarathi with threats or demands, Sarah and her team embarked on a diplomatic mission that would forever change the course of galactic history. Instead of engaging in battle, they offered collaboration. The Zarathi, once proud in their isolation, were presented with a vision of the future, one where the galaxy was not divided by force, but united by shared goals and mutual respect. It took time, but humanity's bold move paid off. The Zarathi, initially skeptical and fearful, began to see the wisdom of unity. The tension between them and the United Species Coalition eased, and over time, they formally joined the alliance. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible. Humanity had not only defeated the Zelvani Empire, but had turned former enemies into allies. What was once a fractured and war-torn galaxy was now an ever-growing coalition of species that looked toward a future of peace, prosperity, and exploration. But the work was never done. The stars were vast, and the challenges would continue. There would always be those who sought to disrupt the peace. But for the first time in galactic history, the galaxy had hope, a new hope born of the smallest species, who had proven that size was not what made them powerful. It was their heart, their will, and their determination to rise above the odds that had carried them from the brink of extinction to the heights of galactic leadership. As Sarah stood before the vastness of space, the future of the galaxy stretched out before her. Humanity's journey was just beginning, and though the road ahead would be filled with challenges, she knew one undeniable truth: as long as humanity stood united, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The stars were their domain now, ***, and nothing would stop them ***. And that concludes the story. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or if you want to work on a new concept.